Well, I think that through undermining the heroic veneer with the humorous,
Yes.
Pope is criticizing the veneer, the exalted beauty and glory.
I see. Okay.
And I think
okay.
just as there's that movement of layers,
Yeah.
there's also movement throughout the passage where
Yeah.
it starts with the self-exaltation, these are all
Yes.
my amazing qualities, to the characters recognizing, or questioning rather, the implications that these have in the face of mortality. So I think that the layers are not only within the language, but also within the passage.
Okay, it's the last part. I think I understand what you're arguing now. It's the way that you put that as a kind of another layer.
Right.
Would this be another way to say what you're saying, that the epic level is invoked to reveal the triviality, the silliness, the foolishness of the contemporary reality, but that there is also an implicit mockery of the epic?
Yes. Yes.
So it's so the mock epic means using epic to mock, expose the foolish incongruities, but you're also arguing that it's kind of like a boomerang effect, that it also calls into question the whole epic level, or
right.
Okay.
As I say here,
Okay.
The humorous strain often compromises the heroic veneer. However,
I see.
the paper is dealing with kind of like the comparison between an apparent epic and then Pope's mock epic. I feel like there's so many similarities here that it's difficult to distinguish what exactly is the difference between the two. Because I feel like in Homer there are these similar questions of legitimacy in terms of the heroic veneer, or the
How central would that idea be, do you think, to the argument that you made? That is, that a comparison among these four passages shows that it's a very fine line for Pope between epic and comic, and that one might even go further and suggest what? It's hard to tell at times whether he's imitating or spoofing epic.
Right. I feel like Pope recognizes qualities of Homer that are mock epic. Like in these two passages that you've selected, I feel like those are not epic passages. Those are where Homer is kind of going into an area of mock epic, and Pope is inspired by those passages, and I think he does push them a little bit further, exaggerating the ridiculous. The heroic veneer isn't as, if we're using this current system, isn't as thick. It's more permeable to the humorous strain beneath.
All right, that comes a little more clear than it did in the paper, but I think that's a really interesting and important idea. What is it about that conception now of Homer, not of Pope's version of Homer, that really might be worth kind of remembering, that about the epic, or about the way Homer's epics work, that they're not uniformly, in any kind of pure or monolithic sense, heroic, right, or grand. That, for instance, you wrote your previous paper on Hera,
Yes.
and that is as much a comic sequence.
Yes.
So I guess what I'd really underscore
Right.
is your point that even the original epics interrogate themselves. They're more complicated
Right.
in the variety of tones
Right.
than one might expect.
Right. And just to more explicitly say that.
Yeah.
Because
But this is helpful, Amy, because I can see now why you're making it's a complicated argument in and of itself, and you're aware, but I think you didn't quite explain the further complication of having, say, Pope translating Homer.
Right.
Right. There's
Right.
another dimension there that.
So perhaps Pope brought to Homer
Yeah.
his ideas of the three, like the different layers, and emphasized those and exaggerated those within Homer's work. So I guess it'd be really interesting to write this with passages from a different translation of Homer,
Right.
as well as Pope's translation and Pope's Writ of the Law.
Yeah, which is a project for another life, and your senior thesis, PhD thesis. But yes, you're in that kind of house of mirrors, aren't you? Where you're
Right.
sort of seeing these infinite
Right.
reflections. So, but that helps me understand, why you were having a little bit of difficulty, kind of accounting for it. It's understandable that you would find it hard to maybe explain that. I wonder if we look back at the beginning.
Okay.
Might there be a way we could focus, and it might even mean simplifying a bit, just sort of, cutting out. It's possible in a paper to indicate that you are aware of further complications or
Right.
possibilities, and not take responsibility for
Right.
defining all of them.
Yeah.
So maybe we could try that
That'd be
with
good.
the opening paragraph.
I also feel like I kind of added in my thesis after having written the paper, so it's not very carefully done. I feel like this paper, as with many of my papers, I kind of developed the thesis throughout the whole rather than clearly stating it and then clearly proving it, which is something I need to work on.
It seemed to me, I know this was Hell Week for you. You had 3 papers, I think, or 3 big things.
Right, yeah.
So I had that feeling that you had sort of discovered along the way some things that if you'd had another day, you would have gone back and maybe begun with.
Right. I feel like the most successful way to write a paper would be to write it like this, talk to you about it, then go back and write it again, and it would be so much more fulfilling, satisfying, successful. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's try it then. How might you sort of pull out here if you're sensing that you kind of found or you broached your thesis here? How could we highlight that? And would we want to articulate it the same way?
Right.
So where is it that we should?
Well, I think introducing the 3 layers is where I try
These
to
3 layers: the heroic gloss, the humorous strain, and the underlying issue.
Right.
All right. So let's give another try to defining that. The heroic, I might say veneer. Gloss sounds already kind of superficial or judgmental, doesn't it? It has gloss or glossy, but the heroic level or veneer.
Right. Although it is glossy to some extent.
Well,
it's very
Pope's
attractive.
is, isn't it?
Well, Pope's is
especially
because it's like the beauty that you're getting drawn into, and it's just like attracts you, and just like even.
You're right.
And I mean, as is the the glorious, the
Yeah.
shining armor,
Yeah.
the glory coming back from battle victorious. So I think it is a gloss. I think it is also a veneer, and I do use that word there.
Yeah,
So,
you're right.
yeah.
I think that Pope revels in the artifice
Yeah.
and the kind of glowing, gleaming.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
and that's part of what defines it as a layer, that it's so attractive that you want to be absorbed into that and delight in the glory and the beauty.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really nice. Okay. Heroic gloss, the humorous strain, and so we need to...
I think the biggest issue is the underlying issue. And kind of,
okay.
like, what is that, and what is its relationship to the three others? I wonder if perhaps I shouldn't even have it set off as just like an M-dash list, and kind of, well, I don't know, discuss their relationship to each other in some way, and perhaps introduce, maybe use a metaphor more and talk about very clearly the differences between Pope and Homer. We'll set up the similarity and the three layers and define those, and then suggest that there may be a difference, and then where that is. And perhaps that would be a better way to go about the introduction, rather than kind of waffling through this and then presenting it weakly at the end.
I'm wondering if, you know what Occam's Razor is in the medieval period? That it's an idea in logic that the simplest solution is often the best, the right one. I think one of the difficulties that you might be having with this argument is, as we've said, its complexity.
Right.
Really. And I'm wondering if one way to kind of carve some things off would be to leave Homer out of it, and just sort of take as a given that you've got a heroic level or aura or plane, and you've got a humorous kind of grounding or a parallel current. I mean, and if we leave Homer out of it, or leave it for your PhD thesis, then I think you might be able to set up the issue here. I mean, isn't it exactly you said we need a metaphor. It's some kind of the relationship between the heroic and the humorous.
That then...
Like what?
That then gives gives a critique. Or
well, I mean, what about dialectic? Since that's one we've used. That it's a dialectical tension between the heroic and the humorous, and that generate. Then you get some other metaphors, such as there's this dynamic opposition, and maybe even it's not always clear. Maybe that one, it isn't as if you go A and then B and then you get C. Maybe it's A, B, and this dynamic interaction sometimes favors A, sometimes favors B, and that maybe it's less ascertained, less clearly defined, and that's part of what's fun and sort of keeps us on our toes in reading it.
What being less clearly defined?
The degree of epic magnitude or wonder versus the humorous, ironic undercutting.
Right. So you would be arguing then that the humorous presents the underlying issue, and its interaction with the veneer.
Yes.
That
Yeah, I mean, let's think about that just as the model, the paradigm, maybe.
Okay, because that's a little bit different than.
I think it is, and I want to, we're going to have to think about this, because I think that the Sarpedon speech, at least as I read it, is anomalous. That is, it doesn't fit as much our little model, maybe. But that's okay. Don't forget. We set up. It's whatever the idea. Yeah. Whether it's a Freudian analysis or a Lacanian, whatever. You set up the model, and then if the passages, the text, doesn't seem to fulfill that model or demonstrate that model, that's okay too.
Interesting.
Something interesting has been shown anyway. Yeah.
So
we don't have to.
Okay.
You go ahead.
I still think that it does have that same pattern.
Even here with Sarpedon.
With Sarpedon,
okay.
Yes.
All right. So tell me.
Because he is talking about his life and how glorious are we, how adored are we. We have all these beautiful lands back home. It's so
this
rich,
is the self-exalt quality.
Right.
That's where we disagree. Yeah.
So I think that is incredibly self-exalting. And I think it's also humorous. I mean, anyone standing up and saying, "I am so amazing," like.
No. That's your. He doesn't say, "I am so amazing." He said, "Well, I mean, what does he say in praise of himself?"
Why are we so adored, basically?
Okay, so first of all, it does begin with a question.
Yes.
Why?
But here, as opposed to with Clarissa, he moves away from the question. His questions are so long that they just become lists of his attributes rather than like why this, as the.
I think I see that, but yeah, I don't see the humorous undercutting, and as prominent as dominant as you do. Okay. That's.
Well, I feel for one he's ridiculous.
Yeah. But he is a hero, Amy. I mean, what about that?
You don't hear anything about his actual.
Oh, well, he do in the rest of the Iliad. I mean, granted, he didn't. But this is not. It's not as if Thucydides comes out and speaks this way, right? Yeah. And if we were in the Rape of the Lock and the Baron spoke this way, you'd say, where does this guy get off? Yeah. Right? Then it would be obviously ridiculous. Yeah. But I think, what about, there is a kind of heroic prerogative that he's, to his credit, he's seeing it as a prerogative. Right? And he's going further. He says, why do we have these prerogatives? And his answer is something like, well, because we are heroes, we have to earn it, we have to show it. That doesn't seem as self-aggrandizing. Okay, well, what about this then? What if we say that taken as its own, there is a slight humorous strain, and Pope recognized this, took it and elaborated upon it with the speech from Clarissa, exaggerating the humorous. Okay, now, all right, now you've shifted to something, I think, where you've got a much better case. Okay. I mean, obviously, it would make sense. Yeah. For Pope to take a, let's call it a straight kind of heroic, magnifying, aggrandizing moment, and then put something quite like that into the mouth of Clarissa and to reveal its incongruity or its inadequacy or even silliness.
The incongruity of self-aggrandizing speech, or in general?
No, from Clarissa's lips. Yeah.
Why would he want to put it in Clarissa's lips? Like, why there must have been something in this speech that made him think it was ridiculous for him to want to exaggerate the ridiculous, you know? Like, why would he think that self-aggrandizement was something to be exaggerated and made fun of and thrown in the faces of people? See, that's like why I think that there is something here.
Something inherent and
like, even like
in the Sarpedon original.
If like someone is just like standing there, even if they're questioning, but they're just talking on and on about how great they are, like, people are gonna make fun of them. I think that's what he like recognizes, picks up on, and exaggerates.
Aeneas in the Aeneid, he comes in and he introduces himself and he goes, "Sum Pious Aeneas." I am Pious Aeneas, and pious it meant even more than pious religious. It meant I am a charismatic leader, right? And it's not, nobody laughs.
Yeah.
Because he is, he is Pious Aeneas. There is it is a self-assertion.
Yeah.
But it's an heroic self-assertion. So, some reflections on that conference that I just finished with Amy. I think what I was able to do, and it didn't take all that much doing because Amy is an extremely good, serious, and confident student, is encourage a kind of give and take. That she was pushing back and arguing herself. And I think that as a process is pretty close to what I'm hoping to do as a teacher generally. So I felt quite good about that. What is it about? How can one hope to have more and more useful office conferences? Well, partly it's time and energy, isn't it? It's just, and the longer I teach and the older I get, the more I feel that this is a really important part of teaching that I didn't give as much priority to, or didn't conceive as being as important as I do now. This is a writing-intensive course, so I require all the students in this course to come in at least once, and usually twice. Well, once to kind of plan what they're going to do on a paper. So I briefly will talk them through, so what is your argument, what is your idea? And I can maybe help them see what would be complicated enough or potentially complicated enough to be worth developing as a 5-page paper in this case. But I also have conferences at least once or twice with each student in the class on the paper after they've seen my corrections, suggestions, and comments. I think overall, Williams students are not so likely to take advantage of office hours, and that it is it's an important possibility that we as teachers need to impress upon them, and I'm not above just requiring them to come in, and I'm hoping that some of that will carry over. That is, that the student will get the idea that this could be really helpful, and that she might feel more likely to not only come back and see me, but in another course to pursue the opportunity to talk with a teacher. I remind my first-year advisees, among the things to sort of keep on their agenda would be try to make a connection with one professor every term. And almost everybody at Williams is here because we're teachers. We like to teach. We want to talk with our students. Go in and just introduce yourself. You don't have to have a problem or a paper to talk about. And if you can kind of get in the habit, make a connection, it'll be easier second or third time you go in. And I think a lot of good things can happen in the office if the professor indicates that she's not just receptive but eager to talk individually with the students. For me, as an English teacher, the question really is a question of time and energy. One reason why I think writing intensive courses really should be limited in enrollment, and as of now they're limited to 19, but I think ideally if there were, say, 12 students, each of whom is writing, say, 5 papers, the students would get a lot more out of it because the teacher would then have the resources, mainly time, to connect more often, more individually in the office. One of the small difficulties I had in that particular conference was that though I had read her paper very carefully, it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I couldn't remember, the detail. I certainly couldn't remember the model that we were debating, that she had set up, and it took me a little while to kind of get back up to speed. So, again, ideally, in the case of an office conference, it would be great if I'd had time to, say, look over her paper again to refresh my memory and to kind of highlight the questions and issues. She had obviously done that clearly, but being a little more task-oriented and goal-oriented would be helpful, but again, is kind of time-consuming. I'd also I would distinguish between kinds of office conferences. A conference on a paper has a quite clear purpose. I very often will even make up pretexts to get students in the office for early in the term. I especially try to do this with my first and second year students, and I might have a slim pretext. For instance, I think I'm one of the few English professors left on the planet who actually requires students to memorize poetry or chunks of Shakespeare, and partly because students are shy about doing that in public or reciting, and partly because it's time-consuming to have them write down, the 12 lines from Shakespeare. I might use that as a reason for an office conference, and I'll tell them I'll prompt you. Don't worry if you get lost, but then that becomes the catalyst, and we can talk about perhaps the student's background or kinds of interest in Shakespeare, or also have students give me a sort of little mini intellectual autobiography. I find that very useful for connecting with students. I might ask, tell me about yourself, in particular, generally things you're interested in, you do, what some of your goals are in this particular course, and characterize your relationship with Jane Austen or with Milton. I often learn kind of helpful things that for discussion. I might learn, for example, that one student is an actor, and this is somebody I can kind of go to enact, to read out loud a passage. Or I might find that another student has she's really interested in feminist critique, or somebody is really interested in is a dual history and English major. And if I'm working on paper topics, perhaps in upper level courses, a term paper topic, it's very useful to kind of know that to help steer, orient, and direct. It's another way to help